JJ3K here, and it's time for another random album review. This time, the random number generator landed on Ray of Light by Madonna, an album that came out in 1998. It was her seventh studio album. Um, I remember it. I was 20 years old in 1998. I remember that there was one single that I think it was the title track that was on heavy rotation on like VH1 and things like that. So I'm familiar with at least one of the tracks on the album. Um, it turns out I heard a couple of the tracks. But let's get into the review itself. This was really more of a dance oriented album. I grew up with Madonna, being a child of the 80s when MTV was new, and you couldn't escape Madonna, Prince, Michael Jackson, and a lot of the heavy rotation artists on MTV, and of course Madonna was one of them. I even own a Madonna record. So I am somewhat of a fan. But after listening to this album, I kind of realized that it was more the nostalgia of, Madonna as a person and growing up. I guess the best way to put it is like, as far as her status in the pop world, she was like the Beyonce of my generation. Like Beyonce is the, Madonna of the modern generation as far as status and pop culture impact and um, but anyway, back to the album. It said that it had five singles that came out. It did have a lot of critical acclaim, but starting with track one, it was called Drowned World, slash Substitute for Love. It was, ethereal, atmospheric, you know, um, very electronic. Um, Once again, that's how this album. This was a big change in the direction of her music in general. Track two, Swim. Guitar driven. It sounded like there were some more live studio instruments as instead of mostly synths and keys. Um, this is also a time, the late 90s, where like auto tune was starting to come in, and perfection was one of those things that was beginning to be sought with as far as you know everything being perfectly on the beat, everything being more electronic, everything being quantized. This is kind of the infancy of that starting to happen in the late 90s, and you could really hear it in this. Um, Track three, the title track, Ray of Light. Once again, it's a very heavy rotation. The video, I gotta be honest, the video, I remember it to this day. It was always on VH1. You flip the channels and there's like Madonna doing her like little thing with the, behind her. So I do remember that song vividly. Um, Typical dance song. It was such a long track that like, I walked away to get my frozen pizza out of the oven and came back, and like I really couldn't tell, I was in a different section of the song or anything. Um, Track four, Candy Perfume Girl, um, kind of a glitchy electronic sound. It's just her vocals over loops. There are parts of it that remind me of Garbage, like Garbage, the band's number one crush, the one from the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. There are elements of it kind of reminding me of that. Track five, Skin. Softer, like whispering track as far as the vocals. You know, Kind of a ballad over dance music, EDM, uh, kind of rave music. Definitely the theme of this entire album. Track six, Nothing Really Matters. Some computer glitch sounds. More of the same electronic dance music. Nothing really. a lot of these tracks, there's nothing that really stands out as unique in comparison to the other tracks on the album. Um, Track 7, Sky Fits Heaven. Um, another thing I was noticing, I wrote it here on track 7. It seems like, I could be wrong, but a lot of the songs, the opening line of the song is the title of the track. Um, so more trance, dance hall. This one was more of a disco kind of sound with some industrial type like drums. Track 8, Shanti Ashangi. And forgive me, I didn't do like research on this. I don't know the significance of this, but you know, I, I I don't know the significance of these chants. This isn't a backstory on the album. This is just my review of it. But tribal trance in another language. Industrial type drums, kind of Middle Eastern music. Track 9, Frozen. This is another one I remember from VH1. It was on all the time. Catchy, more of the same, 90s club music. Um, Real quick side note, I don't want to, I didn't pay attention to the lyrical content, overall. This is just kind of my, you know, reaction and review of this album I'm hearing for the first time that I was randomly selected for me by a random number generator. So I didn't do a lot of research. These are just my kind of personal opinions on it. So her lyrical content might be great, but as far as the sound, it sounds like a lot of the same enunciation, not a huge amount of range in the vocals throughout the tracks. I mean, there are standouts. I'm not saying everything's exactly the same, but it's not. There wasn't a track on this album that caught my attention, like that grabbed me, other than just listening for this review. But enough of my rant. Track 10, The Power of Goodbye. More of the same. A ballad song, some acoustic guitar voicing, or could have been real acoustic guitar. Track 11, To Have and Not to Hold. Some harmony in it. It was melodic. It was the only song, at least the only song I wrote on here where there was some tonal variety, or more noticeable tonal variety. 12, Little Star. I was reading this is the time, around this time was when her daughter Lourdes was born. And track 12, you could definitely tell was made, penned to her. Musically, spacey, ethereal, some synth pads. Once again, lyrically, it was very obvious that it was a poem to her daughter. And the last track, 13, Mer Girl, MER Girl. I found it kind of boring, once again, my personal opinion, reading a poem over music. Overall, my review, once again, is meh, it's not for me. It really got me thinking that, at least for me, Madonna's cultural impact was more, once again, at least for me, was more of a nostalgia thing. Looking back on somebody who was always on MTV. I mean, there are other people, Michael Jackson, Prince, but as a aspiring musician, someone like Prince played every instrument, so obviously that's something I'm focused on. Madonna, I'm not saying she didn't do the same thing. I don't know what her contribution is to the writing process as a whole. There's a reason why she's Madonna. She's obviously very talented, but as far as 1998's Ray of Light by Madonna, nah, it's not for me. Rock on. Thank you very much for watching my crappy upload. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe and click on one of my other videos wherever it may be. Also, I have an old channel with like hundreds of uploads of random things. Please subscribe to it as well, wherever it may be. Thank you very much.